Hey AP Langers, I'm Dr. Clark, and this video is all about the AP Language and Composition Test. Starting with the May 2020 administration, College Board has adopted a new format for the AP Language and Composition Test. So what we're going to do today is we're going to take a look at the new format, and we're going to try to give you an idea of what you can expect to find on the AP Lang and Comp test this coming spring. As most of you probably know, the AP College Board offers two different English tests. The first is AP Literature, and that class is probably the way that you would expect a literature class to be. You're going to read novels, you're going to read poetry, you're going to read short stories, and you're going to learn to analyze and appreciate these great classic timeless works of literature. This class, AP Language, is quite a bit different from that. This is a nonfiction class, which means that we're mostly going to be reading nonfiction. What we're going to really focus on is rhetoric, or argumentation. Rhetoric is the art of speaking or writing persuasively. And what we're going to do in this class is learn how to analyze persuasive writing and persuasive speaking. How do writers make a persuasive argument? How does a speaker persuade an audience? And what is the effect of all this in terms of the context, the audience, and the author's purpose? Like all AP tests, the AP Language and Composition test is graded on a 5-point scale. What that means is that your score is converted into a score 1 through 5. Now, a 3 is generally considered passing, although most AP language students consider 4 passing, because a 4 is the benchmark that most universities use in order to give you college credit. Now, a 5 is excellent. It puts you in the top 10% of students nationwide, and definitely is a good goal. But keep in mind, you don't have to get a 5. If you get a 4, you still qualify for college credit. College Board bases your overall 5-point score on the AP Lang and Comp test on 2 major sections. The first major section is the multiple choice test. Now, on the multiple choice test, you're going to have 45 multiple choice questions. It's going to be divided into 5 sections. Now, there are 2 different types of questions on the multiple choice section of the test. The first is the more traditional rhetorical analysis questions. What you're going to do is you're going to read passages, arguments, essays, letters from famous people throughout history, and you're going to be asked questions that relate to the rhetorical choices and strategies and the purpose and the argument that the author is making. So you're going to want to read those passages very closely, choose the correct answer, and then you're going to evaluate the rhetorical strategies that the author uses. How does that author appeal to the audience? What is the author's purpose? What are the strategies that the author uses in order to convey a message to the audience? Now, the second type of question that's going to show up on the AP Lang and Comp test is new. So all of us are going to be adjusting to this new style of question. They're calling them composition questions. What it does is it asks you to read like a writer and consider revisions to a text. So instead of just evaluating what are the rhetorical strategies that the writer used, you'll have to think about what you would do. So the passage that you're offered may not be a finished, polished piece of writing. In fact, it might be a rough draft, and it's going to ask you questions about what should be added, what should be taken away, how the organization should be changed. These are questions designed to evaluate your writing process, not necessarily just your reading process. So that's the most important major change to the AP Lang and Comp test. The second major section of the test is the essay section. The essay section counts for 55% of your total score. There's 3 types of essays that you're going to be expected to write. The first is the synthesis, the second is the analysis, and the third is the argument. Each one of those is worth 1/3 of the essay portion of your score, which means if you think about it, each essay is worth about 18% of your overall score on the AP test. Now, all told, you have 2 hours and 15 minutes to complete this portion of the test. You can use that time however you like, but the College Board recommends that you spend about 15 minutes of that time reading and analyzing the prompts, and then spend about 40 minutes writing each of the 3 essays. Each of the 3 essays is scored on a 6-point analytic rubric. The analytic rubrics are divided into 3 sections: the thesis, the evidence and commentary, and the sophistication portion. Let's start with the first section, which is the thesis portion. Now, in order to earn the point for the thesis, you need to respond directly to the prompt. Now, that means that you don't merely repeat the prompt, but that you respond to the task that the prompt asks you to engage in, and that you do that directly in your thesis statement. It's essential that you take a clear position in all of your thesis statements. Don't merely state there are pros and cons, there are good and bad, or that there are good arguments on both sides. The second section, the 6-point rubric, is called Evidence and Commentary. Now, altogether, you can earn 4 points on this section of the rubric if you have really good evidence and you have really good commentary that connects that evidence back to your thesis. You have to have specific, significant, and relevant evidence, and you have to show how that evidence relates to your overall thesis. Now, the commentary section of the 6-point rubric is the part where you explain how your evidence relates to your thesis. You see, it's not enough just to cite your evidence. You have to explain how and why that evidence supports your overall argument. They call this section commentary. If you've ever studied the Toulmin Model of rhetoric, you know that Toulmin called this the warrant, and it's an essential part of any argument. You state your argument, you provide evidence, and then you show how the evidence relates to that argument. That's how you're going to earn those points on the commentary section. The third section of the 6-point rubric is called Sophistication. Now, what this means is that they want you to develop a complex argument. They want you to take a nuanced position. Avoid simplistic arguments. Avoid absolute claims where you simply say yes or no. Instead, provide a nuanced, well-defended argument that gets at the heart of the issue and really explains the complexity of it. If you want to get a 6 on an AP Language and Composition exam, it's absolutely essential that you engage in that type of nuanced argumentation. The first of the 3 essays is called the synthesis essay. Now, this was added to the test a few years ago by the College Board as a way to kind of simulate a mini research essay right there on the AP test. Now, obviously, they can't let you go out and conduct original research and gather evidence. So what they do is they provide you with 6 or 7 sources that are right there in your packet. And your job is to use those sources in order to support your position on some kind of controversial issue. They'll provide you with the controversial issue. They'll provide you with the 6 or 7 sources. Your job is to integrate those sources into a synthesis essay in 40 minutes and get the best score that you can. The second essay they're going to ask you to write is an analysis essay. In the analysis essay, you're going to read a famous speech, letter, or essay from a famous person in history and analyze how the author makes his or her argument. Now, this is probably not a type of writing that you've done in other English classes, and so it might be the hardest for some of you to learn, but it's really not that complicated. What you want to look at are the specific rhetorical strategies that the author uses and their effects on the audience and how that helps the author achieve his or her purpose. So it's not an opportunity to argue for or against the author's argument. That's the argument essay, which is the last one that we'll talk about here in just a second. The analysis essay is focused completely on the choices the author makes and why those choices make his or her argument more persuasive. The goal is to analyze how the author makes his or her argument. So how do we do that? We focus on specific rhetorical strategies, things like tone, word choice, imagery, figurative language, all the different things that an author or a speaker can do in order to make the argument more persuasive to the audience. And as long as you can stay focused on analyzing what the author does rather than arguing for or against what the author says, then you're going to do well on the analysis essay. The third essay on the AP Language and Composition test is the argument essay. Now, this is your chance to take a position on a controversial issue. What they'll do is they'll provide you with a quote or a short passage from a famous person, and your job is going to be to take a position on that topic. So sometimes you'll support, refute, or qualify an author's argument. Sometimes you'll take a position on a controversial argument that they make, but the goal is going to be now to argue. In the second essay, we were analyzing how good rhetoricians make arguments. Now it's our chance to show that we understand how to make a good argument by demonstrating it. So you have 40 minutes to write the argument. Now, unlike the synthesis, you're not going to be provided with any sources, any evidence, any examples, any statistics. Everything has to come from your own head. So what you're going to have to do is think about the personal experiences you've had that relate to it, the things you've learned in classes that relate to it, the things you've read from history or from the news or contemporary events that relate to the argument that you want to make. So those are the basics of the AP Language and Composition test. You'll have a 55-question multiple choice test that you have to complete in an hour. You'll have 3 essays that you have to write in 2 hours and 15 minutes. We'll submit all the materials to the College Board. They'll grade them, and sometime in July, they'll give us our score on the 5-point scale. So what we'll do now is we'll spend the next 8 or 9 months learning how to write these essays, learning how to do well on the multiple choice, and hopefully by the time May rolls around, you'll feel pretty confident about taking the AP Lang and Comp test. If you want more specific information about each of the 3 different types of tests and the strategies that you can use to write them, check out our other videos about the synthesis, the analysis, and the argument essay. Until then, thanks for listening. I'm Dr. Clark.